There comes a moment in a man's life when something inside him rearranges itself completely. Not through motivation, not through temporary confidence, not through another promise to become better, but through a quiet internal shift that happens after enough pain has stripped away every illusion he was still hiding behind. It usually happens after heartbreak, after betrayal, after emotional exhaustion, after sitting alone in silence long enough to realize the life he was living was not built from truth, but from fear. And in that silence, something becomes clear. The chaos that once controlled him no longer owns him the same way. The wounds that once shaped his identity no longer define his future. The fear of rejection that once dictated his choices no longer sits on the throne. For the first time, he feels something unfamiliar inside himself. Space, stillness, direction, authority. This is the moment a man begins becoming sovereign, not perfect, not emotionless, not superior, sovereign. And sovereignty changes everything because it is the moment a man stops living as a prisoner of his past and starts becoming the architect of his future. Most men spend years reacting to life without realizing it. Reacting to loneliness, reacting to validation, reacting to rejection, reacting to emotional chaos, reacting to childhood wounds they never consciously healed. They believe they are making free decisions, but underneath the surface, their nervous system is still being controlled by fear, shame, abandonment, insecurity, and survival patterns formed long before adulthood. This is why men chase relationships that destroy their peace. This is why they tolerate disrespect. This is why they over-explain themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. This is why they perform constantly for approval, because the wounded boy inside them is still trying to survive emotionally. But eventually, something changes. A man becomes tired. Not physically tired, spiritually tired. Tired of abandoning himself. Tired of losing sleep over people who bring chaos. Tired of shrinking himself to maintain connection. Tired of confusing attachment with love. And that exhaustion becomes sacred because it finally forces him inward, into silence, into shadow, into accountability, into truth, into the parts of himself he spent years avoiding. This is where sovereignty begins, not in control over others, but in responsibility for himself. The modern world teaches men to seek status, dominance, attention, and external success. But ancient traditions understood something far deeper. A king is not defined by power over people. A king is defined by power over himself. His thoughts, his impulses, his emotions, his reactions, his decisions, his integrity. This is the first code of kingship. Rule yourself, or your wounds will rule you. Before healing, a man is often emotionally reactive, triggered easily, addicted to reassurance, controlled by fear of abandonment, drawn toward chaos disguised as chemistry. But after healing, something different appears inside him. A pause, a calm internal space that did not exist before. He still feels deeply, but he no longer collapses into every emotional wave. He observes, breathes, grounds himself, chooses intentionally. That pause becomes his power. Because sovereignty is not emotional suppression. It is emotional self-leadership. And the deepest shift happens when the inner child finally feels safe. Every man carries younger versions of himself internally. The neglected boy, the ashamed boy, the lonely boy, the boy who learned that love was unpredictable, the boy who learned to overperform for approval. For years, that boy quietly shaped his relationships, reactions, fears, and attachment patterns. The man thought he was chasing love, but often he was chasing emotional safety. He thought he feared losing people, but deeper down, he feared reliving abandonment. And this is why healing changes everything. Because eventually the adult masculine returns to that younger self and says, "You don't have to protect us anymore. I'm here now." That moment changes the internal hierarchy. The wounded boy stops running the kingdom. The adult masculine finally takes the throne. This is the second code of kingship. The man rises when the child no longer has to survive alone. And once that internal shift happens, everything changes externally. He speaks slower, moves with more intention, reacts less impulsively. He no longer over-explains himself to earn understanding. He no longer chases emotionally unavailable people to prove his worth. His sense of self is now anchored internally rather than externally. Before sovereignty, a man often sees relationships through fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of betrayal, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. But after sovereignty, he begins seeing relationships through discernment. He no longer chooses women purely through chemistry, fantasy, or emotional intensity. He pays attention to peace, nervous system compatibility, emotional regulation, consistency, accountability, integrity. Because now he understands something most men learn too late. Attraction without peace becomes suffering. This is the third code of kingship. A sovereign man chooses stability over seduction. Because he has healed chaos within himself, he recognizes chaos in others faster. He no longer romanticizes mixed signals. He no longer mistakes trauma bonds for deep connection. He no longer feels addicted to people who destabilize his nervous system. Emotionally grounded women begin feeling more attractive to him because his body finally remembers what safety feels like. Women who communicate directly, women who regulate maturely, women who bring calmness instead of confusion, women who feel like peace rather than warfare. This changes his future because his next relationship is no longer built on wounds trying to complete each other. It is built on wholeness, choosing wholeness consciously. And as this transformation deepens, other men feel his presence differently too. Some will be inspired by it. Some will be intimidated by it. Some will seek guidance. Others will resist him because grounded masculine energy forces people to confront themselves. But regardless of their reaction, they feel it. Because when a man unifies his inner world, he becomes a pillar in the outer one. This is the fourth code of kingship. A king's presence is leadership, not his title, not his money, not his image. His presence. Presence forged through suffering consciously endured, through truth accepted, through shadow integrated, through emotional discipline practiced when nobody was watching. This is why true masculine leadership feels calm rather than performative. The sovereign man does not need to dominate rooms to command respect. He does not need constant attention to feel valuable. He does not need aggression to prove strength. His energy speaks before his words do. And eventually, the most important realization arrives quietly. Sovereignty was never about power. It was about freedom. Freedom from inherited patterns, freedom from unconscious wounds, freedom from childhood survival strategies, freedom from emotional chaos, freedom from abandoning himself just to be chosen. This is what the journey was really about all along. Not becoming someone else, but returning to who he was before fear fragmented him, before pain taught him to perform, before survival replaced authenticity. Now life moves differently. He chooses differently, loves differently, speaks differently, builds differently. His standards rise naturally because self-respect has risen with them. He no longer negotiates with disrespect. He no longer overrides intuition to force connection. He no longer stays where his peace is constantly under attack. Instead, he slows down, observes patterns, protects his energy, trusts his body, trusts his silence, trusts the wisdom he earned through suffering. This is not ego. This is alignment. And once a man reaches this level, his future changes permanently because he is no longer building from wounds. He is building from consciousness. Externally, he may not look dramatically different at first, but internally, everything has changed. The fragmented parts have unified. The reactive patterns have softened. The nervous system has stabilized. The inner war has quieted. And now there is something inside him that remains steady regardless of external chaos. This is the emergence of the king archetype. Not domination over others, mastery over self, the ability to remain grounded during uncertainty, the ability to protect peace without becoming cold, the ability to love deeply without abandoning identity, the ability to lead himself before trying to lead anyone else. That is sovereignty. So if you are rebuilding after heartbreak, healing attachment wounds, confronting your shadow, reconnecting with your inner child, or learning to trust yourself again after years of emotional confusion, understand this clearly. You are not lost. You are crossing the threshold. The old identity is dissolving because the sovereign man inside you can no longer survive inside patterns built from fear. Trust the silence. Trust the discomfort. Trust the rebuilding beneath the surface. One day you will realize the pain was not there to destroy your spirit. It was there to return you to your throne. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe. This channel is for men rebuilding themselves mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually through grounded masculinity, Jungian individuation, nervous system awareness, emotional discipline, self-mastery, and sovereign living. And comment below, what part of your journey made you finally feel different as a man? Read the comments carefully, brother. You'll realize many men are walking the same path beside you. Chop wood, carry water, and let's keep the fire burning.